Entrepreneurs Podcast.
Welcome to the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today, I have my friend Robert Vazquez from Florida. I'm going to say you're from Florida, Rob, because I know you're from down in Miami, but you're not in Miami anymore.
I'm in Orlando. I'm a transplant now. I can't believe how long I've been up here, but Miami is still home away from home. South Florida is still my home, but Orlando's become my new place, man.
Good deal, man. So, for those that don't know you, Robert, what can you tell us a little bit about your upbringings?
My upbringing, oh man, I've had like a lot of entrepreneurs, man. We all have some rough starts. I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in Section 8 apartment housing, which I'm very grateful for. It made me really passionate about what I like to do and what I'm doing right now. Now, to be fair, I didn't realize I'd want to be in real estate, kind of growing up. I just knew that I was looking outside of a third-story apartment window, looking at the shitty little houses across the street, thinking that, man, if you own a home, you're rich. Because I lived, on this side of the block, in the Section 8 apartment housing. And by the way, the houses that were across the street from my view weren't nice houses. But I felt if you had one of those houses, you were rich.
Where is this at in Miami?
This is actually in Hollywood. This is in Hollywood.
Oh, this is Hollywood. Okay.
Yeah, this is Hollywood, Florida, man. And it's interesting too, man, because when you grow up in this section, in this area, and everyone's kind of, for the most part, just how we poor, okay, below poverty line, all Section 8 area. And when you have poor people calling you poor, it really motivates you to say, "Fuck this shit. I want to make some money here,"
Yeah.
And that was my thing. I couldn't wait to get a house. I always wanted to have a house. And I got my first house when I was 23 years old. So I was really proud of that.
Wow. What were you doing at the time?
Mortgages. I got out of Iraq. I was injured overseas. I hurt my back.
How long did you serve for?
A little over 3 years.
So, well, thank you for your service. Did you use a VA loan for that house or?
Nope. I got creative financing. That first
Really?
house that I bought. Well, when I say creative, meaning I ended up buying the house, making $20,000 at closing, negotiated the furniture, all my closing costs. When I say the furniture, there was specific pieces: a couch, dining room table, which I called out my $315,000 dining room table,
Right.
and a few other pieces that I felt that I wanted. And that was pretty cool at the time, where I was able to get paid to buy my first house.
Wow. I had to pay to buy my first house, So
Creative, bro. I got real creative at the time. I remember that the time was very loose. We're talking right before the market crash. A couple years before the market crash. So it was super easy to get financing for everything. It was really easy to get creative with requesting a higher purchase price and be able to get cash back at closing. So I got all my closing costs covered, and I got myself a little seed start to start doing improvements that I wanted to do around the house.
good deal. And you were doing mortgages at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about pre-2008, right? Like, how was that business? How did it look like? Tell me about all the great things, right? That Wolf of Wall Street lifestyle.
It was 100% Wolf of Wall Street lifestyle. And I'll tell you right now, at the time when I got that job, I didn't know what the hell a mortgage was. I didn't know that was a profession. I didn't know what mortgage brokers was, what a loan originator was. What I knew was I was broke. I was hungry. Okay. I was too proud to ask for help. I got back from the military. I was injured. I was separating from my ex, and I was sleeping out of my car. And I was too afraid, not afraid, I was too proud to ask for help for family, and I was going around to these different job interviews trying to figure out what I was going to do in my life, right? I had no idea. Here I am getting out of the military. I don't know what the hell I want to do. I went immediately back to work at a call center, the same job I left when I joined the military. And I was like, what am I doing here? I just traveled the world for 3 years. I've been to combat, and here I am back in a call center. I just felt like very claustrophobic. I felt like the world was caving in on me. Anyway, I get to this interview, and I'm a dick during the interview because everyone's like, oh, you can make $1 million, and the manager's driving a Toyota Corolla. So when I went to the interview, I was a complete dick. I was like, oh yeah, you can make $1 million. Yeah, okay, all right. Next thing you know, I'm seeing these young guys wearing these fucking nice suits. Everyone's got nice watches, and just that Wolf of Wall Street environment. I'm like, what's going on out here? And during the interview, the guy goes, "Go sit on the sales floor." And I did. And I was a dick with the guy. He puts me down. And the guy puts me, he's like, "Dude, hold on 1 second." Puts me on speakerphone with his bank. Press option 1 for checkings account. I'm like, what? He goes, "Hold on. Option 2 for savings account." And I heard how much money the guy had from Bank of America, the phone teller, uh, telling me how much money this guy had in the bank account. I'm like, I want this job. I need this opportunity. And I almost didn't get it. And they gave me the opportunity, probably the bait and switch. I'm not sure if you're ready for this. You got to go for the second interview. Man, I wanted that job so bad. And before I knew it, I'd say within like 90 days, definitely within 90 days, probably within 35, 45 days, I had my first $10,000 a month. And I was like, oh my God, I'm rich. 10,000, right?
Of course, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
rich.
I get it, brother. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, then the months started rolling in. Then I had family not believing like the kind of revenue I was making. My stepfather, I remember him, in an argument with my mom and coming over, spending a couple nights, and he saw my paycheck stub, and it was like $28,000 for the month. And he's like, "What the fuck is this?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? It's my paycheck." He's like, "How are you making this much money in a month?" I go, "Wait till next month." Because I was priming myself for a 40, 50K month. And I was like, dude, this is game changer. So I went from living in a car in a Ford Mustang, okay, not because I didn't have family, and not because I didn't have people that wanted to help me. I was just too proud to ask for help, to making all this money at a very young age. And at the time, it was some of the best sales training you can ever get. But what they did was they taught young people how to make money. They didn't teach financial literacy. They didn't teach people about investing. They didn't teach anyone how to do anything. What you were taught was how to make money and how to spend it, so that next month you can be hungry again to restart that cycle. So I learned a lot, but I didn't learn enough. What I mean by that is, I didn't build up my reserves. I didn't save. I was 21 years old, making 50, 70, 80K a month plus at a very young age, living in South Florida. One of the reasons I left South Florida, it was just a party lifestyle. It was Wolf of Wall Street. It was, earn it, burn it, let's get it again, and it was a very humbling experience when I moved I had to get out of South Florida. The lifestyle just wasn't conducive to being a family man. And I just needed some change. I just realized, self kind of reflection. Hey, man, I'm making a lot of money. I'm partying. I'm not doing things the right way. I'm never home. I'm out of my house at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't get back till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm starting to cycle every single day. At the mortgage office, you had to be there for at least 12 hours a day. If you weren't there for 12 hours a day, you didn't have a job. Okay. And at the time it was Wild West, man. I worked for AmeriQuest before I spun off and did my own branches, my own offices. And we would literally take an application in the morning, and I was closing that loan that evening, fully closing the loan. So we were closing loans, and 3 days later, the file would fund. So in other words, we'd slam it. Then the processors would then process the paperwork after we closed the transaction. Then it
Wow.
would fund 3 days later. It was insane, bro. It was a Wild West.
Don't wonder why we had a 2008, right?
100%.
I mean, think about all the loans that were written that weren't supposed to be issued, or funded, or the person that didn't qualify or didn't have the proper job, or verification on pay stubs, employment verification, like how much money you make? $1 million. Okay, he makes $1 million. Let's fund it. Let's give him the $3 million home he wants. Right?
It was really interesting, man, because when I worked for AmeriQuest, they were a direct lender, right? So we only knew their products. It was only when I left AmeriQuest and I started, getting into the broker world, when I realized all the different banks. And there's levels to things, right? Because you go from being an originator, and then you have the account executives. The account executives, it's like, man, how do you get that job? Because all they do, they're like the drug dealer, okay? And the bank was like the Pablo Escobar. Okay, so Bank of America would be the person supplying it. The account executive would be the person going out responsible for being the representative of mortgage brokerage offices. And they would come into my office. Hey, what do you got? I got 3 guys at a 630 credit score. The guy says he works over here, makes X amount of dollars. The bank rep is right there, from Bank of America, from Chase, from all these big banks, going, Yeah, I could do this. Bam, bam, bam. Here's the pricing. Just like that. I'd say, okay, cool. You're the bank I'm selecting. And I would upload the file, send it over to them, and it would get into the underwriting process. So it was interesting how some loans, I'm like, I don't think I can get this thing done. And a big bank, not just some shady little character, a big national bank would walk into my office and go, we can do that loan. Give us the paperwork. It was insane, bro.
Very relaxed
Underwriting.
underwriting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we got so many friends that got foreclosed on multiple properties, and maybe they were getting properties that didn't have cash flow on it, you name it. But let's talk about getting into the whole 2008. um what were you doing at the time? Like, what was life like?
Life was fucking terrible. Overnight, my business stopped. Overnight, everything just went to an abrupt stop. I thought in that month, by the way, I had a $2 million month lined up. I had lined up so many loans, okay, that it was going to be one of my record breaking months. We were going to make a shit ton of cash. And just everything went by the wayside, which, by the way, also taught me a lesson. I got a deal. I need to work on that shit right away because you never know what's going to happen. Okay. 2008 hit. I'd say, I alluded to how proud I was when I bought my first house. I was 23 years old. I was 25 when I lost it. I was a first wave of foreclosures. From the moment I missed my first payment to the moment I lost my house was like 6.5 months. Okay. And I mean, like, out of the house. And actually, I think it was 4 months, 4.5 months, excuse me. It was that fast. After that, the millions and millions of foreclosure wave hit every single court docket, and the court systems were just backed up. And that started this whole rippling effect of everything just continuing to decline. So it wasn't just the fact that, it was lack of cash flow that caused, the market to tank. You had major financial institutions, Bear Stearns, Taylor Beam and Whitaker, these big mega firms went under overnight. Countrywide Home Loans, they owned one out of every three mortgages in America. They were the largest lender in the country. These guys went under. Everyone was going under. So when you have a business that is based on originating loans, okay, and booking loans, and there's no one doing loans at the time, there's no income. And I burned up all my cash reserves. Okay, so again, lesson learned. From young entrepreneurs, build a fucking war chest, build a war chest, and prepare for war in times of peace. Okay, because that war chest is what's going to get an entrepreneur through difficult times. So I lost my first house at 25, and I have 4 kids. You know how difficult it is to pack up your family. It was very, very humbling experience. Everyone left the industry. I was too proud and too stubborn to leave an industry that made me so much money. I had no idea what else to do. So I was in a bit of disbelief, to be honest with you. I was more in shock, like, I can't process what's going on. I have to figure out how to make this thing work. So what I did during that time is I doubled down on myself on education. So much so to the point where people are like, dude, how the fuck do you know all this stuff? I know it because I literally spent 20 plus hours a day. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. 20, 21, 22, I couldn't sleep. The stress, especially that timeline waiting for that foreclosure to occur. All I'm doing is drinking coffee, waiting for the sheriff to knock on my door. I'm like, what am I going to do? So I could sit there and be sad, or I educated myself on the loan. What happens after I originate a loan? What's the difference between whole loan operations and what are mortgage-backed securities? What are CDOs? How does this work? Okay, how did I lose my house so fast? And I started learning the banking system, and that eventually evolved into me learning about non-performing notes. And then I started pursuing non-performing note trades. And again, I had no idea what I was doing with that, bro. I was completely winging it. All I know is I was like, wait a minute, banks are losing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of homes to foreclosure auctions, right? There's a backlog of years of doing this. Now, in that meantime, while I was learning about non-performing note debt, we started a short sale business. Okay. And I was one of the first wave of people doing short sales where no one knew what the hell short sales were. They were called write downs at the time. So I started learning about, because when I was negotiating with my bank and I lost that, people then started coming to me going, Rob, asking me for input. And I felt like, first of all, to be honest, I felt like a failure. Here I am, I'm losing my house. And now people are asking me, what do I do? I'm like, I don't know what to do. I lost my house. But can you help me out here? So I started calling up banks, trying to help people out. And I started learning about these different tactics to negotiate. Now, again, everyone may know about loss mitigation departments, but at the time, let's say you had a 99% sales force for originations of debt, and you might have a 1% loss mitigation department. That one little weird guy in the corner that no one ever knows what they do, because at the time no one was losing their houses, right? And banks had to retool their systems. Bank had to go from a 99% origination to now 90% loss mitigation. They had to try to limit their loss, they had to figure out what's going on. So you had a bunch of people not knowing what they're doing, with banks now creating massive protocols that had to be rolled out across hundreds of thousands of employees, trying to teach people about mitigating debt. So the short sale business did very, very good for us. I went from losing everything to making over $42 million in 1 year.
Wow.
Okay. $42 million sitting in accounts. And then the government stepped in and took it. All
No
right.
shit.
Yeah, no shit. So this was a really, this is what led me to get into the mortgage banking side. Okay. Because I went from originating debt to then mitigating debt. Okay. Through short sales, through loan modifications, trying to regulate this industry. And then let's just say we got involved in it with the attorney general, because, you know, someone called and said, "Hey, is this one of the guys on the TV?" They said, "No, it's not one of the guys on the TV, but let's investigate." And when they investigated it, it took a 2-year run, frozen bank accounts. The government tried to see if we were going to honor our agreements, which we did. 100% close ratio, 100% success record, track record. And you know, a lot of people make fun of me regarding my use of software and how much money I spend in software. And that software is what saved my ass. But you know what they got it on is, at the time I was regulating for enforcement of consumer rights. I was writing the Federal Trade Commission. I literally had all my paperwork. Apparently, what is it, October 11th of 2008, they created the Foreclosure Rescue Act, and which at the time I was already, you know, doing this business. Okay. And under Florida Statute 494, as a licensed loan officer, licensed mortgage broker, under the license statutes, it allows you to negotiate debt. Okay. You can only negotiate debt on behalf of a consumer if you're a licensed mortgage broker or an attorney. So here I am, and I'm seeing people getting scammed left and right. I'm seeing homeowners paying people thousands of dollars so they can help them, and then getting scammed. It was all over the news. We had a 100% success record, and we were charging $2,500. We had thousands and thousands of people across the country giving us business. Okay, which now you fast forward, when I settled with the state, right, and they said, okay, here's actually bill of clean health. You can do business. All right, you're one of the good guys, and I'm like, fuck you. Literally, you took all this money, you investigated it, and now you're saying that we're good to go, and these are investigative costs. This is bullshit. So we went back and forth. They said, pretty much, if I was the bank, I could do whatever I want. I could charge whatever I want. I could do whatever I want. But I wasn't the bank. I was a third party. So immediately I go, how can I become the bank? Now, meanwhile, this is again with no money. I go up, I go down. And I go, how the hell can I put myself in a position where no one can ever do this to me again? Okay. So I started learning about, how can I become the bank? How can I buy the debt? Right. Why are these short sales taking at the time 2 years, 2.5 years to get approved? Right. Because the banks are just so backed up. Right. Like I did one, we made $500,000 on it, and well, a little under $500,000 on it. And it took me 2.5 years to do that deal, you know, because the bank then traded the debt, had to start the process all over again. And right when we were getting approval, they would trade the debt again. And I'm going, what the fuck? Why? Who's trading this debt? You know? And then I started learning about mortgage trading, okay, debt trading. And then I just started cold calling banks and going, you know what? I need to get my first trade. I need to do this. And I taught myself the business of non-performing notes. There was no book. There was no educators in the space. No one was teaching how to do this. Years later, there were, but everything, I had to cut my teeth, dude. I'm sitting there cold calling banks, not knowing what to ask for, not knowing who to ask, okay, not knowing what to offer. And I'll never forget, I called the Wells Fargo trade desk, and they actually had a trade desk for non-performing notes. Very few companies actually had trade desk for this. And at the time, and Wells Fargo needed $50 million minimum per trade. And that's like, you're a peasant if you're calling for $50 million trade. I didn't have $50 million. Okay. I didn't have two nickels to rub together. I was calling the guy, and I'll never forget, I just got so fed up. I called this guy back, and I was a dick. I mean, I really was. I got super aggressive. He's like, because the guy was, he offended me the way he said something about, like, stop wasting my fucking time, blah, blah, blah. And I got on the phone. I said, listen to me. motherfucker. I'm going to call your ass 50 fucking times a day until you give me a fucking name of who I could call, okay? Because if not, I'm going to be your best fucking friend. And he goes, write down this number. I call the number and I hit on the first pop. I call this guy, go, hey, this is Robert with Countrywide. The guy goes, Rob with Countrywide. Pauses. He goes, yelling, boss, we got Countrywide on the phone. I didn't tell him I wasn't Countrywide Home Loans, okay? I just
Yeah,
let
you
him.
said Countrywide. That was the name of your company.
By the way, we started, I got out of the mortgage industry and we were calling, and then we had America's Loss Mitigation Solutions Corporation. We had all these big names for all the stuff we were doing, and I wasn't getting much action. So I said, you know what? I need to change the company name. Okay. So we created Countrywide Capital Group. So when I started calling, that Countrywide name by accident opened a lot of doors. This was completely an accident. All right. And the guy goes, Countrywide. The boss gets on the phone. He goes, this is Countrywide. I go, this is Robert with Countrywide. And I was a dick. I was like, you know, I don't appreciate being put on hold for this long. And the guy goes, how can I help you? I'm like, I'm looking to try a new market right now, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking to start off with maybe 5,000 loans as a teaser for a case study. The guy goes, 5,000 loans are not a problem. I'm like, what do I do now? I wasn't expecting it to be this easy on that call. Now, meanwhile, it was very difficult. It was very hard. And I'm talking about months just trying to get to this stage. So it's like, you know, I equate this sometimes. It's like, you know, you're building up the courage to ask that pretty girl out for a date. And then you finally do it. She says, sure. You're like, oh
What do
shit,
I
I
do
wasn't
now?
prepared past this stage, you know? And the guy gives me the portfolio, and I went to work. I got very, very good at what I was doing, not knowing what I was doing. I took the files. The guy goes, okay, make us an offer. I said, I'm going to need a couple weeks to go through these loans. He goes, you have 2 weeks. I said, okay, there's plenty of time. I took 10% of that loan and I audited it. Okay. And in the process of me auditing it, I bought more software. I bought a forensic loan auditing software, and I started entering information in. I started understanding there was, you know, mismatching information on the 1003s, the mortgage application, the Reg Z or Truth in Lending wasn't truthful. There was nothing truthful about it. So I started auditing these files and going, wait a minute, some of these applications, they don't have signatures on the 1003s. Initials were missing. So I found fault in this portfolio. And I think I offered 22 cents of the UPB, which is the unpaid principal balance at the time. And the bank said yes. And I turned around and I traded it for a few cents more. Okay. And I made a lot of money. Okay. Enough money to get myself back situated again and go, okay, this worked. What do I do now? Okay. Then we started that process all over again. I went back on the hunt. And then I got to the point where I realized this is very transactional, making a lot of money. Okay. And I did a few trades. I went from residential non-performing notes to then that evolved to us doing hotels, hospitality. Okay. We ended up getting a hotel. Bank said, hey, don't call the owner. I said, I won't call the owner. I had my cousin call the owner, and we worked out a deal. So we did something where we call a direct, we created a direct path to title or clear path to title. Essentially, if I were to buy the debt, I ensured that the hotel owner wasn't going to file bankruptcy. Okay. And because I own the debt now, which meaning I had the option to buy the debt, okay, that I was going to turn around and retrade it back to the hotel owner through a friend or family member. Remember, when I own the debt, I could do whatever I want. In traditional banks, they said like you cannot have a non-arm's length transaction. You can't sell this to a friend or family member. But I, as the bank, I could do whatever the hell I want. So I told them straight up, I'm buying the debt. You owe $8 million. I'm going to buy this at a discount. I will sell it to you back for 5. Can we make a deal? Who the hell's going to say no to that? Literally, man. Imagine you having a multifamily apartment building a $20 million debt, especially right now when we have $968 billion of commercial mortgages resetting this year alone. Imagine you're a good operator, just interest rates have adjusted, right? You got to pay down that balance. Now imagine that $20 million debt that you owe. I bought it for $16 million as an example, right? They don't know that. They only owe 20. I've already said, look, man, you give me $18 million. I'll shave $2 million off your debt. Can you make this thing work? Can you get this thing? At this number, you can refinance. Can you sell this to somebody else? Can you partner with somebody? They say, yes, I make a $2 million rip by giving him a $2 million discount. Okay. So that did really well. And I'm realizing I'm making big chunks of money, but this is not a business that I could scale at the time. Okay. At the time, we eventually started scaling Countrywide Capital Group. I had Brian, this incredible guy I started working with, never met him in person, just met him through LinkedIn. He became my West Coast liaison. So now we had an office in San Diego, I had an office in Florida. Then I partnered with somebody in New York. So now we had offices in New York. Then we had offices in Florida. We had offices in California. So Countrywide Capital Group as a capital markets firm started looking really, really good and really professional. We're making good money. But then again, just that natural PTSD, I guess, of losing everything was just constantly in the back of my head. I became very conservative, very conservative. I didn't spend any money, okay, because I was afraid it was going to all be taken away from me. I got very, very cautious with what I was doing. These are life lessons, right, that you learn as an entrepreneur. And I'll never forget, I did a trade with a bank, mortgage bankers. Imagine right now, Ricardo, you understand this is a good process. You get your group of everyone at a 10 growth, and they go, oh, hey, man, we're going to all partner together. We're going to raise a bunch of money. Cool, right? Now you raise a bunch of money, and now you buy 15,000 loans. Sounds great in theory, right? Because this is what happened. This is what was happening during that time. Now we have a bunch of guys going, we're really good at this. We raised a bunch of money. We bought 15,000 loans. How the fuck are we going to manage 15,000 loans? On paper, it seems easy, right? On Excel format, it sounds easy. Most people might have 15,000 leads in their system, treat it like leads. Now you have to contact and cold call every single homeowner to find out, are they even there? Are they alive? Then you actually have to send physical people out to 15,000 properties and get signs of life. Are people living there? Is a house abandoned? Where do the people live? Bro, it became a massive problem for a lot of these hedge funds that private equity firms were buying this, and that created a massive problem. So then I thought to myself, more money was made selling picks and shovels to the gold miners than the gold miners made mining gold.
Yep.
So if I'm selling the product to the people, let me figure out how I can create an a la carte service to sell these services back to the bank. So I was able to help them procure the loans, selling them to them. And then I asked the question, hey, what are you going to do with these? That one question changed everything. What are you going to do with these? Okay. We're going to look for real estate agents. Okay. I go, I have real estate agents. Who? Those same agents that gave me thousands of short sales and trusted me with their business. I then went back to them and said, hey, I appreciate you guys giving me your business. How would you like to be an REO agent? What do you think a realtor is going to say at that point? REO is gold. During that time, to be an REO agent, you were like the creme de la creme. How do you get an REO account? Okay. So the same people that were giving us business nationwide, we were then giving them a call saying, hey, how would you like to be an REO agent? And we were making a little bit of profit in between. Then when we started seeing the properties need to be renovated because of steep discounts they were getting, these banks started putting money into renovating the homes to capture that delta. I asked the question, who's going to remodel these homes? They go, why do you have a construction company? I go, I have a construction company. So I started a construction company immediately, and we started remodeling banks for homes. Now, looking back, was that probably the highest and best use of my time? I kind of wish I would have focused more at the time of just trading larger pools of debt because I had access, man. I traded over $1 billion worth of commercial multifamily debt in Texas alone. Okay. Over $1 billion in multifamily debt. I wish I would have learned about the capital stack. There's a term, and I say this a lot when people ask me one of my favorite quotes. And the second part of the quote is, if you know yourself and know your enemy, if you know yourself and know not your enemy, for every victory gained, you also suffer a defeat. What I mean by that is I learned the business of how to acquire debt, right? And I was trading it because I didn't understand the process of how to raise capital, okay? And I left so much money on the table because here I am getting creme de la creme properties, trophy properties, okay? But I didn't understand the capital stack. I'm like, man, I'm negotiating a $40 million multifamily and trading it for $16 million, okay? This property's worth more money. But $16 million, I don't have $16 million. I don't know how to do this. Then the process of starting a fund was so overwhelming. It was so expensive at the time. It was so time consuming at the time, where I was like, okay, every time I'm going to go down this rabbit hole trying to start a fund for it, the same process still occurred, where every time we were reaching out to investors, bro, it was like scared money on the sideline, scared money. You know who made money? The guys that had, forgive me for saying it, but the guys who had the balls to jump into the market, because the market was still to an extent going down. And they had all this scared money, I call it sideline money, just sitting on the sideline waiting for the market to stabilize. And what happens? It's like everyone buys that stock at the peak value, but not when it's rising, right? Now everyone knows about the stock. Now they want to buy it when it's at the peak. You should have made the money at the bottom. Then you would have wrote it up. Okay. I mean, man, I was buying houses in Point Siena for $20,000. Those houses right now are trading for $300,000 or $400,000. Imagine if I didn't sell all those properties. Okay. So it's like investors, every time we pitch them the idea, I found a document in 2011 when I got serious about trying to raise capital. And with Countrywide Capital Group, we had our first fund we were launching, Distress Opportunity Fund. And every investor that we cold called, they were like, "Are you kidding me? You're going to invest in real estate in this market?" I go, "Yeah, absolutely." And then a couple of years later, everyone's like, "Hey, can we get in?" I go, "Can you get in, bro? That ship is fucking sailed. That ship has sailed. You left hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. Okay. The access that I had with banks. So we did really good trading debt. But again, I went after low hanging fruit because I asked the question, what are you going to do with this? And that gave me consistency in cash. And that's something that I needed. Okay. So we scaled out our construction business and that just brought in massive amount of cash. It was smaller. Okay. One trade, 7 figures, easy, no problem. But doing these accounts was 7 figures every single year, multiple jobs. Like I was making money every week. Okay. So that was a problem that I didn't realize I was solving for. And I didn't realize what kind of a problem that was occurring for me. When I say problem, meaning I gave myself a job. Now, again, dude, we made a lot of money. So am I upset about it? Absolutely not. We remodeled 3,500 houses. Okay. I made more money doing that than flipping houses. And it was guaranteed. It was guaranteed because if the bank screwed me, my liens would be on there. And guess who's in first lien position? Me. Okay. So it's like I was hoping they wouldn't. Now, BSI Financial, a lot of people know them. They screwed me on about I had 40 to $60,000 in invoicing. Okay. Did I care? Yes. Did I really care? Bro, I made millions of dollars off of them. No. Okay. It was like a little error on an Excel. Fuck it. They lost because what happened is BSI is a servicer. Okay. Had a bunch of loans that were given to them through a major hedge fund. Okay. And when that debt was traded, it eventually became to BSI. They ended up losing 20,000 loans. Okay. Because it went from BSI to then Kronos and from Kronos to another bank or another servicer. And I got in good with a lot of different asset managers. So when we have a good business, a good relationship, okay, if they were to leave, they go, "Hey Rob, I'm going to bring you over to my new company." I go, "Perfect." Why? Because I perform. When we traded the debt, these asset managers get ranked on their performance, as anyone does, right? What's your contact ratio with defaulted borrowers? Can you offer them cash for keys? Meaning, can I offer them cash for keys? Okay, because I became like almost like a sub asset manager for these companies. So that time was an evolution. Okay, it was bobbing and weaving, trying to stay alive, trying to stay afloat. And I never left the industry. I evolved in the industry. I started off in the mortgage industry, then that evolved to negotiating debt, then that evolved to being the bank, and that evolved to then servicing the REO portfolios. And that's how the companies that we started evolved from. It was more of a la carte. Okay. I heard a long time ago, and I've been saying this a lot, you can get rich solving rich people's problems. And that's what we were doing. We created an a la carte service. Hey, you want to use all of our services? You can. Hey, you're ramping up your business and you only need our real estate brokerage to sell your properties. Okay, you can use just that service. So we tailored all of our marketing to default servicing, and that did really well because that's what was hitting. That's where the gold was at the time.
Man, I would say, Robert, and I've known you for a few years now. We're good friends. That you are the perfect example of pivoting. You
How-
became a master at pivoting. And if you stay long enough in this business, you have to do what you did. Um, I've pivoted also over and over and over again. And the more I see people staying in the real estate game for a very long time, that's what they do. I don't see a guy that was flipping houses in 2008 flipping houses today. I don't think they exist. There may be one or two people out there, because there's always the the guys that can almost not change. They don't accept change or whatnot. Or maybe what they did is they stopped, they did something else, and then they got back on it. But I don't think somebody was flipping houses in 2008 and they said, "Oh, it's cool to flip houses in between 2008 and 2012," and they continue to do that because that what was happening back then was it was like hold on a second. Even if you bought a house for 20 cents on the dollar, you couldn't rehab it and sell it because nobody was getting approved for loans, right? I was there. I was doing that back at the time. Um, and today, I see you and I see other friends that we have in common that roam around the same circles, and we stay in the real estate business because and we haven't talked about what you're doing today, but we'll get that into in a minute, right? But we're all in real estate, but we're not all necessarily doing what got us into real estate, which was either I got in as a landlord, and I honestly don't like being a landlord. I personally don't like it. Okay, you laugh because you probably understand why.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and but I got in as a landlord, and even though we have some houses and stuff, that's not a business I want to grow. I was talking to a guy yesterday through text. He wanted one of my lead managers, and he got on the call and he interviewed, and he was in love with the guy. And so I called him back and I said, "Hey man, what's going on? Are you moving forward? What's the deal? Because I'm holding this guy for you, and I got other people, interested in getting his services." And he goes, "Ricardo, man, thank you so much. I appreciate it. But I just think I'm gonna get out of the whole lead generation business altogether, like prospecting, directly to the seller." And I go, "How do you go from interviewing a lead manager to thinking I gotta get out of doing acquisitions myself? Why?" Like, and I texted him right back and I said, "Hey man, do you want to get on a call? I want like I really want to understand what's going through your head because right now is some weird times, Robert, and you know this, right? I don't think right now is ugly because you can never. I don't know that replicating a 2008 is a thing. Okay, it's like it's two different times. But right now, times are weird. They're weird for the guy that was wholesaling in between 2018 and 2023, and everything was on an up. You know, it was just riding the wave up, and they're making all kinds of money on assignments. I was one of them. I mean, I still do some deals, but nowhere close to what we were doing back then, right? But then you see changes in the market. You see things that are, not performing like they used to before. Like for instance, cash flow on rentals with DSCR loans with the
Hmm.
interest rates the way they are right now and the prices, right? So two things that affect the landlords today is pricing on the properties
Hmm.
and the interest rates on the loans. So if the prices are overpriced or they're maybe hyped up because we were on an up market for a while, and now you got higher interest rates, which we're right now what we're in the sixes, maybe seven, sixes, sevens,
Yep.
something along those lines, right? What's the cash flow on one of those things? Maybe it's not that good because the price being up and the interest being higher than what we had 3 or 4 years ago takes all that cash flow away. So that eliminates that pool of buyers. And it doesn't eliminate it, but it reduces it to like
Hmm.
a 20% of what we used to have on those landlords. So if you're a wholesaler, and I'm talking about wholesalers and rehabbers right now, are you gonna really buy and rehab and wholesale or wholesale and rehab to a landlord? Most likely no, because now the landlord knows he needs to get it cheaper. So his offers are not gonna be what we're used to be asking. I even saw hedge funds buying properties at 90%.
Hmm.
I don't know what they're buying today. They're probably somewhere around 75, maybe 80, maybe. And he has to be turnkey. But the moral to your story, and I would say to mine as well, is that you have mastered the secret to pivoting. And you have been able because of adversity. So that's what we do as entrepreneurs. We face adversity and we're like, well, shit, if I can't make money right now doing this, what do I do?
I think the difference right now, that not the difference. I think that the eye-opening, um, uh, you know, situation for a lot of entrepreneurs right now is that they got into a business when the market was going up. So when you're making money, you're like, I'm an entrepreneur. No, you're not. You're making money. There's a difference. Okay.
Oh yeah, I love
When
that.
everything's going well, you're making money. You're not a baller, dude. You're not an entrepreneur. You're somebody who got on the train at the right fucking time and you're riding it up. An entrepreneur is when that train fucking stops. What do you do? Because when the train stops, that means a money train stopped. How do you shift? How do you pivot? What do you do? And there's a lot of people that in the industry you can pivot now and still stay in the industry. Sometimes businesses have to pivot. And you look at companies like Samsung, Nokia, and these big companies, right? If you look at what they started doing to where they are right now, like I think Nokia, I think started off as a toilet paper company or something like that and became an electronics giant. So where you start is not indicative of where you're going to finish, right? Because you can pivot, you can stay in business, an entrepreneur staying afloat. But there's a difference in this industry of the gurus that I see in the industry that they become massive like gurus and educators. And then when the market shifts, then they're selling, I don't fucking know, solar. Then the next week they're selling credit repair. Then this, to me, that's not, especially from a public state point of view, it's difficult to lend credibility to someone who is shifting so many different times. And when I tell people like this with my new agents, right? When are you successful in real estate as a licensed agent, for example? When you've been doing this a while, because when they know Ricardo as the realtor, as an example, over time I have a realtor, Ricardo the realtor, Ricardo the realtor. But when it's Ricardo the realtor this week, Ricardo the insurance guy next week, Ricardo the telephone salesman, the next week, they don't lend. There's no credibility there. You're popping doing little small transactions, but there's no referral base. There's no longevity in that because you're shifting so much. Our business has evolved, okay, but we have never let go of anything. So, for example, as we made more money, we acquired verticals that support our prior business, right? And because I own the life cycle of a transaction, that shit wasn't overnight. This was a 20-year fucking plan. I literally sat around with my guys one day, a buddy of mine who was an appraiser, a buddy of mine who owned a title company, a buddy of mine. We're having cocktails, and I'm just the mortgage guy. And I just looked around the table. I go, how awesome would it be if this round table of men were companies that I could acquire in my portfolio? It just a thought. Just a thought that popped in my head, and that thought is something that was like a fire that just kind of like just kept kindling in the background. And the more I fed that idea, the bigger that fire started to grow. And that's how we evolved into like having all the companies that we have right now. From title, we still have mortgages, we still have real estate brokers, we still have the title company, we still have the construction company. We just evolve and keep adding business services that complement our business. I don't need to have every single piece of a transaction, but I'll tell you right now, almost every single transaction I do, we're making profit. We have two profit centers at a minimum. Whether you're going to do the mortgage and the title, the acquisition, the rehab, we have two profit centers on everything we do. So what we've learned, and I think I've shared this with you on stage, on your stages, is creating what I like to call Bob. Okay, I'm a
Yeah.
big acronym guy in the military. Bolt on businesses. What can you do to bolt on a business to your existing business without necessarily having to recreate the wheel? Right? How can you partner with people? What can you do to be able to bring additional revenue streams to a transaction that you're already a part of? Right? You're already going to make money wholesaling the transaction. How can you make even just a small little profit on one other vertical, one other industry? Okay, and that's where I like to challenge a lot of people is start there. Figure out ways to bolt on businesses, not necessarily create or start new businesses, because everyone asks me, how do I run different businesses? It's not easy, man. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. And I saw this great thing I posted. I fucking loved it. It said, being an entrepreneur is working the same work ethic, whether you receive $7 deposit in your account this week or 70,000, you still have to put in the same amount of work. And a lot of people don't want to do that shit.
Yeah, most people want to do the. I've seen it so much on online on like other so-called influencers. Uh, I just automated my business and I don't do shit no more, and I live free and blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, let's say that that's true.
Mhm.
How long did it take you to do that? Like, how many ups and downs did you have before you got it to where it is right now? And the other one is, how soon before you got to get back on it?
Right. That's exactly it. I was about to go there because sometimes you can scale. And look, the bigger picture here is, there's an entrepreneur life cycle journey, right? You have to first understand a business. You have to understand it as a revenue. What's the revenue generating activities of your business? How can you get consistent revenue? Then when you start having consistent revenue, how can you create systems to start scaling, right? Then it starts becoming predictable when it comes to marketing and understanding your KPIs. There's an evolution of learning how to run a business. But for most people, you have a people problem, right? And this is an industry-wide thing. This is a nationwide thing. It's a global thing. You start having people, and then people, you know what? They get burnt out of the business. They want to start their own business. They don't want to do this anymore. So as you start scaling, right? That scaling potentially is based off of you finding good labor, good people, right?
Oh yeah,
That one person leaves, two people leave, three people leave. Guess what? You're back in the trenches, bro. You're back in the trenches. And there's
bro.
nothing wrong with it. Look, there's nothing wrong with it. A lot of people are like, I scaled, I'm advertising, I live free, I'm all over the world. But then what happens the next week? Man, I got to get back on it. We're scaling, we're doing this, we're doing that. There's nothing wrong with that because there's seasons where, hey, things are going really, really well. And you know what? I can afford because I've got the time, not a money situation, but I can afford to take off because I scaled myself out of certain roles. But sometimes you got to get back in either because of loss of people or because you want to shift and you need to be able to grow another department because you see a shift in the marketplace. I say this a lot. When you're starting off in business, you're like this. You need to fucking focus on your business, right? But as you start making a little bit of money, you start looking down on the business, right? You're working on the business, not versus working in the business. But when you have the ability to scale and look at things from a higher perspective, now you have the ability instead of just looking down to look up. When you look up is where it gives you that time flexibility to be able to say, okay, what's going on in the marketplace right now, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I've got this section going right here. What can I do to add another revenue stream? What can I do to bulletproof something, right? Because is there a shift in the marketplace? I say this all the time, man. I like being on a boat. I love it. Okay. When I'm a captain on a boat, meaning when I'm in charge and people are on my boat, I'm responsible for everyone's life. I'm also the guy who's got to be Captain Fun or Captain Killjoy because we're all having a fucking great time. And I'm looking out and I see a big rainstorm coming. I go, party's over, guys. We got to start heading it back. No, the party's going. And all of a sudden, safety first. We got to fucking go back. That's the job as a captain, right? And as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, that's your responsibility to start looking at that horizon and saying, okay, are things going well? Are there smooth seas? Do we keep going forward? Fuck, we got a storm coming, okay, which we're in right now. We're in a storm right now. So a lot of people are like, hey, wholesaling's a little bit tough right now. So what? Deal with it, right? You're not complaining when you're slamming deals, you're doing 20, 30, 40, 50 deals a month, right? No one's complaining at that point. It's when everything drops significantly. So what do? How can you shift? How can you adapt, right? How can you add another ancillary business? How can you shift your marketing and maybe focus on something else with respect to instead of single family homes, can you do lots? Can you transition to mobile homes? Can you take the infrastructure you've already built and just shift it slightly, pivot it to doing something else? So, that right there is what really makes an entrepreneur is understanding the market and shifting and adapting when the market shifts. Okay. Or understanding that there's a shift in the market and trying to get ahead of it. Because I'll tell you right now, if you're cooking, on the grill and you burn the burger, it's too fucking late. The burger's burned. You either got to start a new burger, whatever the case is. You got to monitor that grill. You have to pay attention. And that burger is your business. You want to have that perfect burger. Fucking watch what the hell you're doing. Pay attention to your business. Okay. And I think far often in this industry, we hear people talk about scaling and scaling and scaling to the point where they're not even monitoring their business anymore. Okay. And again, this goes to people. This is not a catch-all statement because there's a lot of great entrepreneurs that are fucking doing fantastic. They've scaled themselves out of their business. They've got good operators, and that's what we all strive for, right? But then what's next? Is that your peak in life? Now you have a business, it's operating, you're doing well. Is that really going to last forever? Is the wholesaling industry going to really last forever? Is a home flipping business really going to last forever? Okay. What's going on in the marketplace? We have a massive fucking housing shortage. Okay. We have a 7 to 10 year window to make a lot of money. But then what's going to happen once the market completely stabilizes? Because we haven't been in a stabilized market since 2008. Okay. We haven't been in a market where we actually have a proper supply and demand ratio. Okay. We've been in a backlog for years trying to get caught up to have the amount of inventory that we technically need in order to have a healthy, stable market. Okay. So you have these waves, these influxes of buyers markets and sellers markets because of external influences like interest rates, right? Interest rates skyrocketing. COVID hit, that was an external influence, right? We couldn't control that. No one wants to fucking sell houses during that time. Limited inventory put on the marketplace, pricing went through the roof.
Man, I love this, Robert. And that's what I like about talking to you, man. You got so many different angles to look at things, right? And I remember when you spoke about Bob. I was there. I was front row watching you. That's one of the things I like about throwing my events, right? And I know you've done some events as well. Is that I the first person that gets to learn at these events is me, because I bring guys like you. We get together. You go on stage. You tell your life stories and your wins and the losses, right? So because I'm tired of going to these events where it's all win, 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 win. I was like, okay, well, shit. He just told me about all his wins, but he never told me about the time that maybe he had a tough time, right? Like, how did he get out of that? And that's what people are looking for today, because there are a lot of people are going through tough times. They got to pivot. They don't see that there's something else going on. Maybe they don't see that. Maybe they can be good at the title business. Maybe they can be good at shit. I'm on the VA business now. I never thought in my life I will have a VA company.
Mm-hmm.
Never would have.
Very profitable.
They're profitable. They're good. But it takes a lot of work. It's not okay. Here I am. I'm gonna sell 100 VAs. It doesn't happen like that. You know what I mean? Like you gotta have a good value proposition in the market. Pricing. The guys need to be good, responsible. They gotta have good English. A lot of things need to take place for that business to flourish. And
But you're understanding a need, and that's the thing is as an entrepreneur, you're understanding the marketplace. You're understanding, okay, for example, we alluded to this earlier, finding good people, finding good labor. That seems to be an ongoing problem. Well, what are you doing now? You're solving for a problem by creating VAs and educating VAs and training people to be able to deliver turnkey solutions to people, so they don't have to beat their fucking head and recreate the wheel.
not only that, they get to save money.
Of course.
Because let's think about it. How much does an employee cost in the US? A minimum $2,000 at a minimum. Okay. And that's not counting FICA and all of these things that you got to throw on top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we go overseas and we get somebody that's just as good or maybe even hungrier, right? Because they don't have the same opportunities we have in the US
Mm-hmm.
to make good money. And we can offer that same solution for maybe half the price. And those guys doing that work are happy. They're like, I come to work happy every day. I'm making good money. I'm supporting my family, and I'm given an opportunity that I normally don't have. So that's something I had that I didn't know I had, right? And that's why I went that route. And talking about descaling, so I had to descale my real estate business in order to do the virtual assistant business, because I was getting pulled in two different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And when the universe tells you that's not the way, it's this other way. So you have to listen to your gut as well. And I said, you know what? I know I'm not gonna make the same revenue. I know I'm not gonna, make the same assignments every month or whatnot, having 6-figure months. I gotta start from scratch on this other, um, I would say endeavor. But it's okay. And I bought back my time. And their business it grew. But then I had to descale it a little bit because he had some bad apples,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to get rid of those bad apples. And until today, last week I had to get rid of 2 people, unfortunately for them, um, because that one bad apple will poison the rest of them, right?
Right.
So right now I am working in the business, not even over the business, right? Because I'm like, I gotta look at all these different moving parts before we get big, because once we get big, then it's harder
You don't want to
to.
fix a problem. Yeah, it's difficult to fix a problem when you've already gotten so big. There is the You know, there is one of the issues that I've had forever, and it's still a problem that I fight myself on. Is I built what I built by knowing what I know, by doing what I did. Right, as crazy as that sounds. But I read the book. I think it was not Dan Martell.
Buy back your
Uh,
time.
yeah, but no, not by Biker Time. That's actually a good book. But Who Not How. Okay,
Oh yeah,
and
who
I've
know how?
always
Yeah,
yeah, Who Not How is a great book, and I caught myself that sometimes, and I may be honest with you, sometimes I'm a little jealous because I see people that are so good at not knowing how to do anything, but they're so good at finding the right people to do it.
bro, that's me.
So
I'm
I'm like,
like,
but not me. Like that's the opposite. I'm like, I need to know how to do this. I need to know how to do this, and it's taken me forever to start letting go. I don't need to know how to do that. I'm hiring you for that shit. But there's ebbs and flows, right? Like I said, sometimes you got to get back in the business. Sometimes you got to rebuild certain things. Sometimes you got to get in there and go, this is not efficient. I got to get in this role. I'm going to rewrite this SOP. Okay. I'm going to rewrite these fucking roles. We're going to fix these fucking problems. So now when we start scaling, now I know where everything's at. Now I know who to place in there. Talking about like generalists and specialists, when you start off as something, you're not a specialist in everything. You're generally good at everything, right? As you start scaling, you start putting people that are generalists in these roles until you can start getting them trained up to the point where then you have specialists in each of these assigned roles. So you go from the generalist to the specialist, and that's part of the process of scaling, right? Is you need bodies, throw the bodies in there. We need cold callers, throw the cold callers in there. As it starts getting better and it starts evolving, right? Now you have cold caller, now you have lead manager, now you have disposition guy, now you have whatever, personal assistant. You have different roles for different people because they specialize in specific things.
that you mentioned that, Robert. I learned that who, not how, when I was in the military. And it was by almost like I was forced into it. Because I was on a ship that the reliability on the ship was very shitty, man. I mean, engines will break down all the time. It was like a mess. And there is always said that the number one enemy to a sailor, it's its own ship, right? So it's never the other submarine trying to like bomb you like back in the 50s and the 60s. Now is a ship. And my chief, my leader at the time, he said, "Hey man, I'm putting you in a position of leadership so you can find the people that will help you do the things that we need to do to fix this ship." Especially I was in the engineering team, right? And he said, "I know you're the best at everything you do, but I don't want you to do everything. I just want you to make sure you find the guys that are so good at doing one thing that that's the one thing they do and they do it well. So it's okay if you select the person and they don't do the task. Now you know who you're not gonna trust. But until you try it, you're not gonna know. So start delegating, start but keep an eye on them and make sure that you're catching them before they blow up the ship, right?" And I learned that back then, and today when I get a task on my hand, I'm like, all right, who does this belong to? Because it doesn't belong to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right away, I start thinking, who do I have on my team that I'm gonna quarterback this to? And sometimes I don't have the person for that particular task, but I say, okay, this other person may do it. I wouldn't say half fast, but may do okay with it. At least they can give me a head start while I find the other person that's gonna come
So
and finish
you
that.
had a great lesson at an early age, and it's something that impacted you that you deployed now, and that's a great scaling. I was the person that was too proud to ask for help, and that's why it took me so long to get. I would have been infinitely further in my life had I have reached out and asked for help, but I was too proud. That's not the way I grew up
Yeah,
or
a
whatever.
lot of times it's also personality, right? So I have a friend. His name is Tim Luna. Okay, and I don't know if you ever ran into Tim. He's in Houston. He's a bad motherfucker, bro. Like, but he's one of those Jason Bourne's type guys. Like he's on his own,
Hmm.
and he only closes 3 to 4 deals a year. But
Big deals.
but they're 7-figure deals, right? But he's on the phone. He's following up. He's like all by himself, bro. He actually gave a whole presentation on stage on how he did it. And I was looking at him and I was like, No fucking way. I'd rather spend half of that money on a team or even 70% of that money on a team, but I don't have to do what he does.
So here's where, especially for your viewers, man, where people need to understand that they need to figure out what they want in their life, right? And they need to design that what they want. And here's what I mean by that. Almost every place you go to, you talk about scaling, growing, big, that, whatever, hiring VAs, doing all this other stuff, right? And for some people, they really want to grow a business, right? But the reality is, like, let me take a step back and I'll give you an example of something. Wholesaling for me was reversing my life, okay? Because when I got into flipping, I was doing non-performing note trades. My first deal was 5,000 loans.
You were
Most
wholesaling those already.
Right. But I was doing it at a sexy scale where when I see all these gurus and all this shit over years, like, oh, wholesaling, blah, 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 I was like scratching my head going, that's kind of small. It's not, we're doing bigger shit, but I was like kind of intrigued by it. Okay. That I felt I went backwards trying to start this whole massive wholesaling operation where I had my own office in Colombia. I had my own office in India, my own Bangladesh, everywhere. I scaled this whole business, right? Then we dumped in $42,000 worth of Instagram, Facebook leads, and my team wasn't calling. Okay. And I flipped out. I looked at everyone. I go, you know what? I'm putting all this money. You guys are in a beautiful air conditioned fucking office. You're not having to sweat like the way I sweat my ass off. You're not digging ditches. You're not fucking building houses. You're not doing all the shit. I'm providing a perfect environment for you, and you're still complaining, right? Fuck this shit. And I literally terminated it. And here's the concept of what I meant by that. I had this epiphany where I go, okay, if I make a minimum of $100,000 for every house that I build, okay, minimum of 100K per house, and I just wanted to say fuck all the noise because you have how much money you put out in leads, right? What's your cash conversion cycle? How much money you're putting out there in relation to when you're going to get this thing back? So yeah, we might have a couple $100,000 months, but how long of cash that you're putting out in order to get that money back, right? And I sat there going, I'm managing people in Colombia, in India, Bangladesh, the Philippines, global workforce, my internal office staff, okay? 2, 4, 6, 8, 8 to 12 people in my office as sales acquisitions guys, my administrative staff, all this stuff. I go, what am I doing? Is this really what I want? I could just jump on my motorcycle and travel the United States, which I've done many times, go cross country, fuck all this noise, okay? Make 800 grand a year, okay? Not high figures, am I in the top 1%? Yes, I am. I'm at the bottom of the top 1%. But what am I? Now I have time freedom. Okay. Now I've got this. Now I've got that. So when I started looking at that, I think that it's okay for entrepreneurs every once in a while to reset, have moments of true reflection and go, is what I'm doing what I really want to do? Or is what I'm doing because it's what I'm doing? Right? You're just stuck on this fucking hamster wheel that you just realize every day you're just fucking waking up and you're doing it because it's become routine, right? Are you having fun doing it? If you're not having fun doing it, and it's a job, you become an entrepreneur to buy yourself a fucking job. And is that really what you want? Now, if that's what you have to do because you have a family, you got bills, you got obligations, so be it. But recognize it and then figure out ways to adjust, right? Hey, I know that I got myself in a position that I'm not happy with the outcome right now. I've created this fucking this clusterfuck. How can I then readjust? And I think that's okay for entrepreneurs to be able to do that. Like we've readjusted our numbers, right? When I stopped focusing on wholesaling, not because the market went down, I just got tired. I go, this is not the highest and best use of my time. When we transition and focus to something else, okay, wholesaling, let's say at best, you're a 7-figure wholesaler. Okay, that's the epitome, right? You're making 7 figures, maybe eight, if you're the top half of 1% in the
Bro,
wholesale.
even those 8-figure guys, they don't stay there long enough. They get there when they think they got it figured out. They got to reset their team. They drop down again. They rebuild from back up.
You're doing this
It's a
constant.
hamster wheel.
But then when we transition and focus on doing other things, okay, where I said I'm going to focus my energy somewhere else, my overhead costs significantly went down. My profit went through the fucking roof. We have over a couple $100 million worth of developments in our pipeline right now. In 6, 7 months of me shutting down, 8 months of me shutting down the wholesaling operations, We have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of development projects. Okay, development projects on just one multifamily deal. Again, people are too short-sighted. The longer you're in this business, you start thinking in decades. Okay, in 5 to 6 years. Okay, probably 7 years right now. I know we're going to be making $30 million on a multifamily ground up development, right? Because the performance is already there, the numbers are already there. We already have the construction loan lined up. We're going to do a new building at $32 million. It's going to be valued at $60 million. Why? Because I'm the builder. Why? Because I'm building at my cost. I'm the developer and the builder. So that upside that most people would have to hire a contractor for, I get to keep. But I don't just keep it. I'm sharing that with my investors, right? So it's like, are you okay doing 7 years of your life for $30 million?
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. And that's one deal.
Yeah.
So that same effort that you can be doing running this whole wholesaling operation, you can learn another part of the same business, same industry, real estate, just learning one new asset class, learning about development, learning about ground up development, learning about multifamily, learning about single family new construction. Same business, same mechanics, same operations, significantly greater upside.
It's the theory of the bamboo, Robert. You know, the bamboo takes 5 years to lay down the roots, and then in 11 days, it just shoots up and it gets to like 10, 20 feet up in the air, right? So, man, I appreciate you for being here today, brother. I'm looking forward to see you next week in Tampa at a 10 Growth. Robert, how can people get a hold of you?
Hit me up on Instagram. Follow me. Give me a quick follow. We're Passive Income Cash Flow Kings. Monitor what we're doing. We're going to be dumping a lot of really great content over the next year. We've got a lot of new construction, a lot of ground up development, everything from affordable housing to luxury homes in Winter Park. We've ground up development for multifamily. We're breaking ground on a lot of stuff. So follow me on Passive Income Cash Flow Kings and just monitor the journey, man, because anyone can do what I'm doing. I'm not a rocket scientist, I assure you.
Send Robert a message. Tell him you heard about him at the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast. Um, remember the 10 Grove, June 27th, 28th in Tampa, Florida. Robert will be there, and I'm looking forward to see you. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate you, my friend.
Absolutely, bro. Much love. Have a good one. I'll see you next week, bro.
All right.